Welcome to the Real Lost Boss podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Real Lost Boss podcast. In this episode, we're going to discuss you are what you eat. And this is kind of a follow-on from episode 11 where I talked about can you eat whatever you want and lose weight? And the answer was yes, but that doesn't mean you should. So it is really, really important that mainly for our health, but also for the consistency of sticking to a calorie deficit, we structure our eating in a certain way. From the start of my weight loss journey, it was important to me that I didn't go to extremes. I'd always done that in the past, cut everything out. I'm not going to eat a takeaway. I'm not going to eat chocolate. I'm not going to eat crisps. And I kind of thought to myself, and if I'm being honest, the reasons now have become apparent to me how this worked or why this worked. But at the time, I didn't realize what I was doing. I basically, when I started my weight loss journey, I wanted to do it totally different than any way I'd done it in the past because I'd always failed in the past. And I thought if I do it in a totally different manner, there's a chance I might have success. Just so happens, I did have success. So I basically said to myself, I'm not going to cut out takeaways. I'm going to be more responsible with them. Have one, maybe two a week. Same with some chocolate, same with some crisps, same with going to the pub and having a few beers. And that little bit of balance certainly helped with me being consistent on this journey. Like I say, at the time, I didn't realize what I was actually implementing and putting into my lifestyle. But now I realize having that little bit of balance and enjoying some of the foods that I love or doing some of the things that I love, it took away cravings and it stopped me feeling less restrictive. And that definitely helped with being consistent. So, and it has worked like this. Again, I didn't realize this is what I was doing from the beginning, but what I coach my clients now is the RLB 80-20 split diet. And I have a big section of that. When you come on a one-to-one plan with me, you get a copy of my weight loss foundation guide, which has some of my views have actually changed a little bit since I created the guide, but the basic principles are all the same. And it has some guides in there to help you on your weight loss journey. And one of those things is the RLB 80-20 split diet. 80% of what we eat, healthy and nutritious. 20% whatever you want. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to split that down, how we should look at it, and the major benefits of eating in that way. Now, the 80-20 rule is, I've said this in the previous podcast, is just a very, very common rule within the fitness industry. And I just have my own little, way of how it fits in, basically. So 80% of your diet, healthy and nutritious. And when I look back from the start of my weight loss journey, I might have actually been a little bit stricter than this to start off with. But certainly over the last 6 or 7 years, I've followed this kind of split. So 80% of what I eat is healthy and nutritious. Now, what you class as being healthy and nutritious might be slightly different to what I class. But I've done lots of research and, lots of thought has gone into this. And, we have a lot of fearmongers nowadays on social media, and they'll go around supermarkets and they'll pick items up and go, oh, you can't eat this because it's got seed oils in it. You can't eat this because it's got emulsifiers in it. You can't eat this because it's got preservatives in it. Honestly, to me, it's all a load of nonsense. Look, at the end of the day, we have the FSA, the Food Standards Agency, and they're not going to put or allow things to be put into food that is going to do any serious long-term damage to us. Again, we also have to take into account moderation. And this is a thing with these people that scaremonger around foods in supermarkets and stuff. They don't use any context. They use zero context. They literally, if you have one little dribble of something, it's going to absolutely, kill you in the next 5 years. And it's just a load of nonsense. And things like seed oils, for instance, and especially in America, they've gone about soybean oil and canola oil and things like that. That's a polyunsaturated fats. And you know what? The evidence is so inconclusive that no one actually really knows if there is any major issues with consuming these things, which means generally there isn't. But one thing that is for certain, if you have a good balance of polyunsaturated and monounsaturated, which are things like omega 3s. So your polyunsaturated are your omega 6s, your monounsaturated are your omega 3s. And everyone will agree that monounsaturated fats, your omega 3 fatty acids, are essential to health. And these are the fats we get in things like olives, olive oil, salmon, mackerel, so fish oils, avocado, nuts, seeds, things like that. Your omega 6s are in like your more refined sort of vegetable oils and stuff like that. And if you have a good balance of both of those things, the general consensus is that you are super healthy. You're all good, right? Anyway, so these fearmongers that walk around, and I just don't buy into it. Again, it's everything in moderation. And if the majority of your diet is made up of whole foods and some of your diet contains stuff that, has additives, emulsifiers, preservatives, it's not going to cause you any issues whatsoever. Same with artificial sweeteners, there's been a lot of studies done, and the WHO have just labelled aspartame, which is the artificial sweetener, very common in things like Coke Zero and Fanta Zero and stuff like that, Pepsi Max, as a class 2 carcinogen. And what that basically means is it is linked to possibly increasing the risk of cancers. But think of that word, possibly. And this is, again, the words you'll find with a lot of these fearmongers in supermarkets. They'll hold up an item and go, may cause, possibly might cause, could cause. Do you know what I mean? It's like driving a car could cause you to lose a leg. It could cause you to unfortunately pass away. It doesn't mean it will do. And driving a car is one of the safest things you can actually do. But unfortunately, in some circumstances, some people are going to have bad experiences of it. And when it comes to additives and preservatives and artificial sweets in food, it is like literally millions to one that they're going to cause you any issues whatsoever. Other things that are classed as a class 2 carcinogen with the WHO, being a hairdresser. Yeah? Aloe vera. How many of you guys use a moisturizer that has aloe vera in it? Guess what? That's a class 2 carcinogen. Are you using it? Is it going to give you cancer? Absolutely not. And one thing we have to remember is, again, a lot of the studies done on additives, preservatives, artificial sweeteners are done on rodents. They're done on rats and mice. Now, we have a totally different genetic makeup to rats and mice. Plus, we are a lot bigger than rats and mice. So they give like the equivalent, or the amounts that, like, say, aspartame that they give to a rat would be the same as us consuming 100 cans of Pepsi Max a day for 12 months, for 365 days straight for 12 months. And, again, what's the reality? So there's no context to these things. So again, what I'm trying to say here is what you class as healthy, I might not class as healthy. What I class as healthy, you might not class as healthy. But one thing I can guarantee is if we consume whole foods in the majority and anything else in the minority of our diet, the minority will never counterbalance the majority. So you're going to be absolutely fine. And the honest truth is, if we listened to half of these things, we wouldn't eat anything. We wouldn't eat anything. If you look at something in the wrong way, you can make it sound bad. For example, if you eat too much broccoli, you will get fat, right? If you burn 2,500 calories in a day on average, and you eat 3,000 calories of broccoli a day, right? Then over a week, you will gain a pound of body fat from eating broccoli. But what is the likelihood of anyone consuming 3,000 calories a day of broccoli? It is zero. The honest truth is, if we didn't have things like additives and preservatives in food, food would go off extremely quickly. And if food didn't have any type of reasonable shelf life, it would cost an absolute fortune. You compare the prices of fruit and veg and different foods in supermarkets compared to going to a little independent farm shop. Now, again, I'm not saying you shouldn't go and shop at an independent farm shop. I do from time to time, but I certainly cannot afford to do my weekly shop there because food goes off instantly. You know, it's kind of going back in time, isn't it, where you shop every single day because stuff just goes off, you know, within a day or two. Whereas if I go to the supermarket and I buy, you know, milk nowadays, you know, milk's got, when I was a kid, you used to get milk delivered every day because it went off in a couple of days, even if you put it in the fridge. Now, if you go and buy a carton of milk from the supermarket, you know, it's got a 2-week shelf life on it. And whether you're, you know, a fearmonger around food, oh yeah, that's because it's been highly pasteurized and it's been treated at a certain heat to kill all the bacteria in it. And irrelevant of that, the fact that we can afford milk every single day is because it goes through this process. And does it make it unhealthy? No, it really, really doesn't. Anyway, let's get back to this 80-20, the RLB 80-20 split diet. So 80% of your diet, healthy and nutritious. So what should be the foods that we are consuming to make up this 80%? Lean protein. What is a lean protein? Basically, a lean protein, and again, this is just my opinion, is obviously a high source of protein. The main macronutrient in that food is protein, and it's low in fat, saturated fat. All right, that is the main thing. So chicken breast, 5% fat mince, fish, prawns, whitefish, prawns, pork loin, steaks, to name but a few. I also class eggs as a lean protein. Now, eggs are reasonably high in fat, but they're very good fats, and eggs are super good for you. So I would put eggs into that bracket as well. So most of the protein we should be consuming should be low in saturated fat, very high in protein. And like I say, I'll just repeat: chicken breast, pork loin, steaks, 5% fat, beef mince, whitefish, prawns, and yeah, I class eggs in that. There's loads of others, but those are like some of the main ones. So what wouldn't be classed as a lean protein? A ribeye steak. A ribeye steak is extremely high in saturated fat. Now, again, someone that's doing the carnivore diet would have you believe that that is very healthy to consume. It honestly isn't. Yeah, it honestly isn't. It doesn't mean you shouldn't consume it, but it shouldn't be part of your regular diet. It should make up more of the minority of your diet. Okay. Fibrous carbs. So fibrous carbs are carbohydrates that are full of fiber. They are a slow release of energy. They will not cause your blood sugars to spike, which means they won't cause your blood sugars to crash. This is nothing to do with weight loss. This is to do with health and supporting your weight loss. There is nothing wrong with raising your blood sugars. It's a natural thing. Your preferred energy source for your body is carbohydrates. And again, irrelevant of what any fearmonger will tell you, whatever any keto warrior will try and tell you, carbs are very good for us and they are extremely good as an energy source. But I will do a podcast that goes into a bit more detail of this, but the main issue with spiking blood sugars is if you get something extremely high, it's going to come down pretty quick. And if blood sugars crash, that can cause fatigue and hunger. And those two things are not something we want to experience on a regular basis when we're A, trying to control our calorie intake, and B, trying to increase our calorie burn. All right. So if we have a fibrous carb, the fiber in that carbohydrate makes the rise of blood sugars a lot slower and therefore, or not as high. And therefore, as your blood sugars come down, they come down in a much smoother fashion. So you won't get what people would call a sugar crash. So what is a fibrous carb? Brown carbs, brown bread, potato, white or sweet with the skin on, wholemeal pasta, oats. Yeah, that's about it. Well, it's not about it. There's plenty of other things out there, but those are kind of like the main ones. Fruits and veggies. Now, fruits and veggies are a carbohydrate, but we kind of pop them into a separate bracket. The only vegetable that I would class as a fibrous carb is, like I say, is potato, sweet potato with the skin on. Everything else is classed as a fruit and veg. And if you use something like NutriCheck, so when you put fruits and veggies into NutriCheck, there's a little apple at the bottom and it fills up to tell you that you're having your 5 a day. If you put potatoes in, it doesn't count. It only counts when you eat, leafy greens or, fruits, apples, oranges, blueberries, things like that. So lots of fruits and veggies. They're all self-explanatory. Yes, we have fruits and veggies that are lower calorie, that are better for us. But I'm telling you now, not one person on this planet, there are 8 billion people on this planet, and not one of them has any health issues from consuming too much fruit or too much veg. So they're all good. All right. Low-fat dairy. Again, certain people will have different views on this, but I'm a weight loss coach, and to lose weight or fat consistently, we need to consume less calories than we burn. Therefore, calories are king, and a fat, whether it's good fat or a bad fat, is calorific. So a low-fat dairy, I'm from the country, I'm from a farming community, and I would be run out of my village with pitchforks and fire if I was caught buying skimmed milk. I just cannot bring myself to consume it. If you like it, that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to have a go at you for it. But yeah, a low-fat dairy to me, milk, green top, right? Not blue top, not full fat. I go in the middle at semi-skimmed. I would much rather drink slightly less semi-skimmed milk than go anywhere near skim milk, but that's just my own personal preference. Other low-fat dairies, 0% fat Greek yogurt. You might do low-fat cottage cheese, things like that. And last but not least, good fat. So good fats, I've already talked on this briefly, but certainly monounsaturated fats, which is like olive oil, fatty fishes, omega-3s, so your salmon and your mackerel, nuts, seeds, olives themselves, avocado. All monounsaturated fats, all extremely good for you. Polyunsaturated fats, these would be what, again, some fearmongers would class as things like seed oils, so sunflower oil and stuff like that. Again, the evidence on that being bad for you is very, very sketchy. And certainly if you have that in a balance with omega, so you balance your omega-3s and your omega-6s, you are all good. So that is your 80%. And most of your diet should be made up of that. And what you might actually think, you might be sat there now going, right, so you're just talking like grilled chicken and salad and stuff. No, I'm not. We can break meals down and look at it, and make it an 80% meal. One of my favorite things to eat is gammon, egg and chips. Gammon, egg and chips can be made to fall into that 80% bracket easily. You take a piece of gammon and you cut all the fat off the outside of it. Yes, it is the best bit. I absolutely love it. But you cut that off, so you've just basically got the meat. Yeah, there's a little bit of fat runs through it, but nothing major. You make air fried chips. You have a poached egg, and you do some air fried mushrooms and some garden peas. That is an extremely healthy meal, but it's gammon, egg and chips. Likewise, if you make a cottage pie, you use 5% fat mince. You don't load the mash up with loads of butter and whole milk. You maybe use something like, lighter soft cheese in the mash. You load it out with loads of veggies. Super healthy. I recently did a post on social media. 5 Guys takeaway jup, and 2 5% fat burgers, bacon medallions, low-fat cheese slices, bit of salad on there, air-fried chips. For me, that is a perfectly healthy meal. I'm not saying it's got the most uber nutrition in the world in it, but it certainly isn't unhealthy. And, we can have elements of a meal that are all 80%, and we might have the odd element that's not the healthiest thing in the world, but it doesn't make that meal unhealthy, and you don't need to be that pedantic when you're thinking about this. I'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. But what I mean by that is, take a roast dinner, for instance. So you decide to have a roast dinner, you do roast chicken, you have mainly breast, but a little bit of leg or thigh meat on there, loads of veggies, air fried roast potatoes. You just use Bisto gravy because it's very low calorie. you know, for compared to if you use like the fat and the stock from the chicken. Yes, that might taste absolutely sensational, but obviously it's going to have more calories than just using an instant gravy. And then you have a Yorkshire pudding. A Yorkshire pudding is not the healthiest thing in the world whatsoever, and on its own it would probably fall more into the 20% bracket of when we do this split. But if, you know, if 500-600 calories on my plate are super healthy and I decide to pop one Yorkshire pudding on there, that one Yorkshire pudding doesn't eradicate all the other goodness that is in that plate. So just use a little bit of common sense, you know. Again, some people, I made my protein porridge actually this morning, and I normally drizzle honey on it, and because I got a new jammy biscuit protein powder, which is basically jammy Dodgers, I used a little bit of strawberry dessert sauce instead of honey on it, just to add a bit of extra sweetness to it. Just because I've used basically a pure sugar syrup on, well, honey is a pure sugar syrup, but obviously it's fructose, not sucrose. But just because I've used like a processed sugar syrup and a drizzle of it, 40 calories worth, that porridge is still oats. It is still protein powder, which is just basically dried powdered milk with all the fat and sugar taken out of it. And banana and blueberries, super healthy. It's that little 40 calorie, which is 15-gram drizzle of what is basically pure sugar. Does not counterbalance how good or healthy that porridge is. So that's what your 80% needs to be. Yeah. And again, it doesn't need to be boring, bland food. You can make any dish you love, fall into that 80% bracket. Some people might demonize pasta, whether it's white or wholemeal pasta. I class pasta as it's quite calorie dense. You've got to watch it, but I don't class it as being an unhealthy food whatsoever. So if I made something like spaghetti carbonara and I use bacon medallions, I use a little bit of soft cheese in there, I use a couple of eggs, a little bit of parmesan, and some white spaghetti, that is not an unhealthy meal, especially if it fits with my calorie allowance. Some people might deem it as, I don't. It's got eggs in there, it's got a nice, you know, it's got a not too unhealthy carb in there, it's got protein in the bacon. Parmesan cheese, yeah, again, a little bit calorific, but you don't really need a lot of Parmesan cheese because it tastes so nice. And again, it's not that unhealthy. So you don't need to be that pedantic. Now, the 20% is easy. The 20% is whatever you want to eat. Things that light up your life. It could be hobnob biscuits. It could be crisps. It could be McDonald's, KFC, Domino's pizza, a Chinese takeaway. Whatever you want to eat. Now, so yeah, that's kind of easy. Calorie dense foods, anything that's calorie dense. So, you know, you don't get a lot of it for calories, would definitely kind of, for me, simplify falling into that 20% bracket. Now, there might be certain foods that have a little crossover. I'm always a bit conflicted when I go to KFC. And I know you might be like, well, it's KFC, Neil. Yeah, it is. But, you know, I might get a KFC fully loaded meal. And yeah, it's deep fried. But it's deep fried in vegetable oil. Again, some people will really demonize omega 6s. My main issue is from deep frying in vegetable oil is obviously a lot of that oil can soak up into the food, which can make it reasonably calorific. But a fully loaded meal from McDonald's is from McDonald's. A fully loaded meal from KFC is 1,100 calories. You know, you get a fillet burger, you get a piece of chicken, you get a small portion of fries, KFC gravy. If you go to KFC and don't get gravy, you are an absolute heathen, but that's for a different podcast, maybe. Again, just my personal opinion. And a Pepsi Max. So if I get a fully loaded meal, so a fillet burger, a piece of chicken, some fries, a gravy, and a Pepsi Max, it's 1,100 calories, and you get knocking on 100 grams of protein, right? So yeah, it might not be the healthiest thing in the world, but I'm getting quite a lot of protein for my calories. And as long as I'm not, you know, smashing one in every night, it ain't going to cause you any health. So a little bit of a crossover there. A little bit, right? How would you differentiate your 80-20 split? Does it have to be like so cut and short? No, it doesn't. Don't be sitting there going, oh my God, I've used up all my 20% calories by by, Friday, which means I can't have any treat. You don't need to be that pedantic about it. And again, the odd week, you might be at a 60-40 split. The odd week, you might be 70-30. The odd week, you might be 90-10. 90% of your diet might be amazing, and 10% might be, more what we would call unhealthier, calorie-dense foods. There's no such thing as a perfect weight loss journey, and that is definitely a title for another podcast. So just, again, use a little bit of common sense. How I kind of like to look at it is, I like to look at it because we track calories weekly, obviously we track calories daily, but we look at sticking to a weekly calorie allowance. I always use the analogy of 2,000 calories, or the theory of 2,000 calories a day, just because the math is easy. 2,000 calories a day is 14,000 calories over the week. And how I sort of look at that is 11,000 calories I want to be healthy, and 3,000 can be whatever I want. And then you might just go, right, well, this week we're going to have a Chinese on Saturday night. That's 1,500 calories of me 3,000. I'm going to have a Thursday lunchtime just because everyone does it. We're going to have a McDonald's for lunch. So, I'm going to have a chicken sandwich, medium meal, and I don't know, maybe a cheeseburger. So that's 1,000 calories. So that's 2,500 calories gone there. And then I've got 500 calories left over. And do you know what? Midweek on a Wednesday night or on a Sunday afternoon, I'm going to have a pudding after my roast dinner. And again, you don't need to be that cut and short. You don't need to be, but that's kind of how I sort of look at it. I quite like to have a meal that just falls into that 20% bracket, if that kind of makes, like I say, if I make a meal like a roast dinner and part of that, or I make any dish and part of it's just not, sometimes I might do gammon, egg and chips and it's air fried chips, gammon, and I decide to have a fried egg. Again, I don't really class a fried egg as being that unhealthy, especially if you do it in a little bit of olive oil. It's actually really healthy. It's just a bit calorific. I wouldn't go, right, well, I've used 20% of my calories there, and I've used, again, you don't need to be that kind of cut and shut about it. So the title of this podcast was You Are What You Eat. And basically, what are the main advantages of trying to stick to a split like that, especially while you're losing weight? We don't just get calories from food, right? We get vitamins, we get minerals, we get nutrients, and these are taken out when the food goes through our digestive tract and fed into the body. And it's these things that give us energy, that give us, that puts a little pep in our step, right? And you are generally, and these more healthy foods, they digest better, they improve your gut health, right? So if you're, looking, getting lots of fiber into your diet, getting some things like a bit of yogurt every other day into your diet because it's got probiotics in it and stuff like that. And if you've got good gut health, that transfers into energy levels and feeling good about yourself. And yeah, the more energy you've got, again, the better your mental health is. It's all kind of a bit of a domino effect. Also, if 80% of your diet is healthy and nutritious, the healthier we eat tends to be the lower calorie we eat. The lower calorie we eat, the more volume we can get for our calories. So let me go back to the gammon, egg and chips scenario. So let's say I take an 8-ounce piece of gammon and I leave the fat on it. I use oven chips. Now, oven chips are generally deep fried. They're kind of blanch fried, then frozen, and then you reheat them in the oven to brown them off and recook them. So they are basically fried chips. They're just reheated in the oven. So you used an 8-ounce gammon steak with fat on it. You had oven chips, and you pan fry your mushrooms in a little bit of oil, and you do a fried egg. That gammon, egg and chips is probably going to be 1,000 calories. But if you take that same 8-ounce piece of gammon and cut the fat off, you do your own air fried chips, you poach your egg, right? And you do your mushrooms in a tiny smidge of olive oil, or you dry cook them in the air fryer. That gammon, egg and chips is now going to be 600 calories, right? So, and you're saving yourself a lot of calories, and you're probably going to get a lot more air fried chips. You're probably going to get a lot more mushrooms for those calories. So it's going to give you more volume. The more volume you consume, that's certainly going to help suppressing your appetite. So you are what you eat. If you eat junk, you will feel like junk. So if the majority of your diet, even if you're sticking to a calorie deficit, is junk food, is food that doesn't give you the vitamins, the minerals, the nutrients, the macro and micronutrients that the body needs to function properly, you're going to feel tired, you're going to feel lethargic. It is going to affect things like mental health. And all that is going to have a knock-on effect on you being consistent at sticking to a calorie deficit, which is the ultimate goal. Everything we're trying to put into our life, everything we're trying to change about our lifestyle, the main end goal is to be able to consistently stick to consuming less calories than we burn, because that is the only way to consistently reduce our body fat levels and consistently lose weight. So 8% of your diet is lean protein, fibrous carbs, fruits and veggies, low fat dairy, and good fats. You are gonna feel fuller even while being in a calorie deficit. You're going to feel good about yourself. You're going to have lots of energy. And again, the knock-on effect of that is it is going to really help. There's always going to be that element of willpower and drive and wanting to do this, but it's really going to help with you being consistent with sticking to your calorie deficit. And if 20% of your calories each week, or 20% of your diet, even up to 30%, if I'm being totally honest with you, is a McDonald's which doesn't have much nutrients in it at all, which is full of, highly processed foods which aren't going to digest very well in the body and aren't going to give you, the goodness that your body craves, as it were. But if 20%, so just 1/5 of your diet is made up of foods that aren't nutrient dense, that are more calorie dense, that aren't the healthiest, that 20% will never, ever, ever counterbalance the 80%. But allowing that 20% into your diet will make you feel way less restricted while on your weight loss journey. So while all your mates are going out for a night out because it's Kathy's birthday or it's Dave's stag do, and you're sat there panicking, how am I going to do this while losing weight? You've got a percentage of your calories that you can spend on going on a night out and enjoying yourself. A lot of consistency is consistency, or one of the main reasons that we struggle to be consistent, is over restriction. And that's kind of what that 20%, it takes away the feeling of being over restricted while losing weight. It allows a lot of flexibility, and ultimately, I say this quite a lot, when we're trying to lose weight, we want to feel like we are making a bit of a compromise, not a sacrifice. And allowing 20% of your diet still to have some treats in, although you still have to be conscious because it's very easy to blow calories out the water, you will feel like you're, making a compromise, not a sacrifice while losing weight. Yes, there are other factors involved, but what we eat, calorie control, is the number one thing that we need to concentrate on. And having that nice split in there will definitely really support your health, really support your energy levels, which ultimately will really support your consistency of sticking to a calorie deficit. And having that 20% will mean you're not feeling overly restricted. You've got a nice bit of flexibility, and you're still living your life. Because another thing I always say, and this is the last bit from me for this episode, is if you are either trying to live your life or lose weight, you are going to fail at both. Your weight loss journey has to be built in to your everyday life, and having an 80-20 split of your calories is certainly going to allow you to do that. There we go. That's it for episode 12. You are what you eat. As always, whatever format you are watching this on, please, can you give it a follow, a like, a share out if you can, a comment? It is always appreciated. And as always, till next time, make sure you are bossing your weight loss.